Welcome, good evening. I'm Steve Schwartz. For those of you who don't know me, I host the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast and run the LSAT blog. I'm joined by Shawn of Texas Tech School of Law. Shawn, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Yes, I am the Assistant Director for Recruitment at the Texas Tech School of Law. I've been here for 3 years. I'm a graduate from the Texas Tech School of Law, and I earned my JD and MBA, so I can speak a lot to dual degrees and things like that. But it's an amazing program, and always looking for new law students to come in. So, yeah.
Excellent. So I'm really excited for a fun discussion with you tonight. It'll be part LSAT, part admissions. Hopefully we'll have some fun thrown in there as well. And so I'll share a little bit more about who I am, what I do. I'll invite you to do the same, and then we'll dive in. So again, I'm Steve Schwartz. I'm based in New York. I run the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast, which is a daily LSAT and admission show of sort. And I've been teaching the LSAT for about 15 years. It started on my own LSAT journey when I started with a low score of around a 152, which was not too high for me, given that I was aiming for a top 14 law school. But over the course of what ended up being an entire year, I brought my score up to a 175, and now I've been teaching the LSAT ever since.
That's incredible.
So Shawn, how did you get into admissions, and what do you do more specifically?
So I am on the admissions committee. I'm also the person who goes out on the road and I recruit at different schools. So I go and see pre-law societies, some different pre-law advisor conferences, and just travel all across the U.S. looking for great students that can come and join the Texas Tech Law family. And I've been doing this for almost 3 years. Closer to 2, I guess. And prior to that, I worked in Title IX as an investigator. So I did administrative law after law school. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
We wear a lot of hats in the admissions office. So, we are reviewing files. We're constantly recruiting. We're giving tours. We're doing marketing campaigns and finding new ways to make the law school even better for the students that are coming in. So.
Awesome. Looking forward to hearing more about that. So we'll start the discussion with a bit about the LSAT, specifically, of course, the digital LSAT. Then we'll switch gears midway through to discuss admissions.
Yeah, I've heard there's a lot of new features. How would you prep for the digital LSAT? We get that question a lot.
Yeah, so the digital LSAT, of course, is a big change that's been rolled out over the past 6 months or so. And it's going to be administered on a tablet, specifically a Microsoft Surface Go 10-inch tablet. So it's not a computer. And so you want to prep accordingly. Get a tablet if you can. Doesn't have to be the Microsoft one. Any old tablet is perfectly fine. A Samsung, an iPad, an Amazon Fire. And I would just treat your books like screens. Don't write on them, because the digital LSAT, you cannot write on the screen. You do get a booklet of scratch paper, but you're doing all your work to the side. So that's the biggest adjustment I would recommend making.
That's incredible. So what are kind of the structure and the timeline for studying for the LSAT? I know it's different for everybody, but what's kind of a general timeline?
A lot of folks study over the course of 2 to 3 months, but I actually recommend taking much more time than that, because the LSAT's important. It's the number one factor in admissions. So I would suggest 5 to 6 months to reach your fullest potential. And folks don't want to hear that. They don't want to do it, but it often ends up being a lot more than you expect. And my framework for this is a little bit counterintuitive, because most folks, they'll want to take exam after exam after exam. Instead, I would slow down, build the foundation first. So I have a framework I call the LASER approach to LSAT studying. LASER is an acronym standing for learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. The bottom line is learn the theory first, do some untimed work, then gradually introduce the timing, finally culminating in full-length timed exams. And that's the framework underlying all of my LSAT study plans as well.
I know a lot of people get tripped up by that speed component to it. It's accuracy and speed. So if they work on the accuracy first, trying getting down those different ways to do the logic games and kind of cracking the code on those, it makes it a lot easier to get that speed, right?
Exactly. You got it.
So what are some of the mistakes that you see people making when they're doing their LSAT prep?
One of the biggest mistakes I see is related to that idea of taking exam after exam and measuring yourself. I call this the obsessive practice exam narrative, or OPEN, because folks get this idea that if they just take all nearly 100 exams chronologically in a row, one a day or one a week, they burn out and they don't really learn anything. They burn through valuable practice material. Instead, you want to slow down. Again, when we said accuracy, then speed, but also engaging in really detailed review, analyzing all your mistakes. So do fewer exams and review them in more depth. And I have this idea I call the Socratic review method, where you really analyze your mistakes, why you make them, where they stem from, so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again, because the LSAT really does repeat itself.
Definitely. I know some people get hung up on, again, that time component, and they just keep studying the same materials over and over again, but not really realizing why they're getting it wrong. And am I wrong? Are there just so many ways that they can ask questions for logic games? Are there just so many different ways that they can do that right now?
Yeah, there's a pretty defined number of types of logic games, just like there's a defined number of types of logical reasoning. And there are a lot of patterns to this exam, and it really is a test of pattern recognition more than anything else. And so if you slow down and learn the patterns, then when you see a new question with a different disguise on it, you'll know what they're really getting at.
Right. So if it takes you an hour to, kind of deconstruct a question and figure out exactly how to diagram it, then the next time maybe it's 30 minutes, then it's 15, then it gets closer to time. And then when you recognize it on the test, you're just good to go.
That's exactly right.
That's awesome. So kind of leading up, you said it's 5 or 6 months of heavy studying. And we're not talking about just a couple of hours here and there and not really doing the hard work, but actually putting in the time. As you get closer to the test date, sort of what should you be doing there?
So as you get closer to the exam, yeah, I would say that's where you really start introducing the full-length timed exams. And folks will say, should I do one every day? Definitely not. Leads to burnout. And my rule for this is maximum 2 tests per week and minimum 2 hours reviewing each test.
Okay.
Are there exceptions? Of course, but that's the general idea.
And when would you say is a good time to take the exam? After, you've been practicing, what is kind of the level that you get to in your practice where you say, okay, I think I'm ready for the actual exam?
When your most recent 5 practice tests average where you want your ultimate score to be. So if you want a 165, but all your exams are at a 160, you're probably not going to reach your goal on test day of a 165. Alternatively, if most of your scores hover around that range that you want, then you're probably good to go.
Would you ever tell somebody to just take it? Just because the timeline is coming up where they need to start applying, is that ever a good reason to just take the exam, and hope for the best?
I wouldn't say so, honestly. And you probably would say the same. I imagine that,
right.
If you take it just to see how you'll do, you'll end up with a score on record that you probably don't want to see. And
right.
Schools don't average multiple scores. They only take the highest, but you don't want a less than desirable score on your record if you can avoid it. And there is a new retake limit as well. So there's no need to have one in the tally there.
It costs time and money, and I think it also stresses a student out when they get that low score on the actual exam. But there are still some law schools out there that average your score too. So knowing the policies of the schools coming into the program, ours, we take the top score. Of course, you can see all the prior scores. So we like to know if somebody's trending up, meaning that they've studied hard and worked, really hard at it. We don't necessarily like to see somebody who's trending down, who got a great score and then took it again thinking they'll score higher and actually went down. But we are going to take that top score. We just look at all those different components. So if you were absent on the day of the exam or if you canceled an exam. So.
Yeah, and there's certainly never a reason to be absent on the day of the exam. You can always withdraw even the day before.
Yes. So every once in a while we see that little A, and I'm always wondering what happened there. And that's on the actual application process. If you do have multiple LSAT scores, it's great to write an LSAT addendum and sort of explain what happened there. Sometimes people didn't score so well because there were other issues going on in their life, but they decided to take the test anyway. And it's good to let us know that. One of the worst things you can tell an admissions professional is I don't do well on standardized tests. That's never a good thing to write on an LSAT addendum.
Right. You probably just want to see the number, right?
Right. Yes. So yeah, we've had people who, they went through hurricanes and floods or, had lost somebody, unfortunately, right beforehand. So we understand there are reasons and that they just try to do it anyway and it didn't work out for them. But sometimes it's good to just let us know that.
Of course. I mean, with the fact that the LSAT's being offered more frequently than ever before, there also always is a chance to postpone your test date or just retake on a future test date.
Definitely. That also brings me back into admissions, because there are the applications for our school specifically, and I think most schools in the U.S. that are full-time traditional programs that start in the fall and go through the spring. Our application opens September 1st. So if you have an LSAT score and your transcripts and everything that you need, and you're applying for early decision, that's when we have the most money and the most seats to give out. So as far as scholarship money, it's great to apply early as long as it's a quality application. If you have a 137 LSAT score, it's probably not the best time to actually apply. So just because you have a score, maybe it's not always great to throw your hat in the ring and just see what happens, but kind of also knowing where you fall in the schools that you want to go to. The LSAC website has a fantastic tool where you can place your GPA, your undergraduate GPA, and your LSAT score, and it kind of gives you a range of your wheelhouse schools, your safety schools, and your reach schools. So I think that's a great place for some students to look, but obviously we all want those top LSAT scores.
So speaking of the timelines, Shawn, so we're speaking right now in February, and you just said that there's more scholarship money available at the beginning of this cycle. So talking timelines for a minute here, what would you say to someone who's looking to apply now? Are they better off waiting until the fall when there's more money available and the odds are a little bit higher?
We actually are, this is probably the month when we're going to receive the most applications. We have some early birds that get them in September and October, November for early decision dates. Ours is great because we're not a binding application. So if you get in, we hope you're going to come, but we're not going to force you to. But there are some schools out there that are binding applications. So that's something to kind of be aware of. Then we go into our regular decision deadline. So between September 1st and November 1st is early decision. Then we go into our regular, which is up to March 1st. So we are still absolutely accepting applications for regular decision, and we're going to get a lot of them this month. That's okay. We still have, some seats available. We still have some scholarship funds available. If huge scholarships are a big concern for students, it is great to start applying early in the semester or early in the process. So if they did want to start applying in September, they have better shot at getting those higher scholarships. We accept our last application July 1st. By then, we're pretty much out of money. And we do have some seats still available, but, it gets a lot tighter at that point. So applying early, as long as you have a really quality application, is probably the best thing to do. But we're still, through March 1st, you're still good.
Now, speaking of, you mentioned binding, and we've also been talking about scholarships. Now, applying for binding early decision, I'll admit I'm a little bit skeptical about that, given how it could affect scholarship money. So could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, there are some schools out there that have that binding early decision. If you do get in and hopefully you get a scholarship, that's what you have. The only way that I know of to sort of raise a scholarship amount is sometimes you can come to a school with your other offers and ask if they can, adjust the scholarship amount. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. For Lubbock, we have a very low cost of living. We have a very low cost of tuition. So we can't necessarily match other schools, but you'll still end up with less debt coming through Texas Tech with our scholarships. So we do have all the way up to full rides, but but there are other schools out there who, once you're locked in, that is what you're going to get. But some people do retake the LSAT even after being admitted to a school, and if their score goes up, that's a pretty good bargaining chip. One of the things that a lot of students don't understand about the LSAT is it's not just about getting in, it's about getting scholarship money. If you want us to pay you to come to school. And in order for us to do that, every single point, I cannot stress this enough, on the LSAT is worth thousands of dollars. It could be the difference between getting denied, getting waitlisted, or getting in with no money, or getting in with thousands of dollars. So it's important for students to know that. But if you are in a binding situation, if you did get into a school and it was the school that you want to go to, you have to withdraw your applications from the other law schools. But if you didn't get the scholarship that you want, a good way to kind of have a bargaining chip is retake the LSAT for a higher score.
That is so, so true. I could not agree more. Like, it's funny, there's this retake paradox where folks see LSAC statistics saying that the average retaker only goes up like slightly under 3 points, about like 2.7 points. But even if that's true, the value of a single point on the LSAT by one estimate is $4,000. So
Yeah,
we're going up 3 points, that's $12,000. That's the easiest money you'll ever make. And it could be
exactly.
even more depending on the scholarships you get.
And if your scholarship passes each year to year, as long as you stay in good standing and, fulfill those requirements, that's $36,000. So,
Yeah, or if you get into a better school, then the ROI over the course of your career, your salary option, your employment options, it's huge.
absolutely. Each time that you take the LSAT, it costs you time and money. I don't recommend people just, going crazy. And I know there are limits now on how many times you can take the LSAT. But I think you do have to really prepare, do all the hard work ahead of time, and consider it your job. Consider it as you're getting paid for every point on that LSAT. So that's, I think, a good way to motivate people is understand if you can get that 3 points higher, if you can get that 4 points higher, that's some scholarship money.
That's so true. It's funny. I run this LSAT Unplugged Facebook community, and there were for some folks analyzing their scholarship offers by how many weeks and how many hours they'd studied for the LSAT. So if you get $120,000 in scholarships divided over 8 weeks, 10 hours per week, 120,000 divided by 80 hours is still pretty good.
That's not a bad thing, right?
No, not a bad hourly rate.
And it does. It sort of helps you get into those schools that you really want to get into. So obviously the GPA is also just as important, but the LSAT is something that you can sort of control. Doing the hard work for 4 years to get that high GPA is fantastic, and that is something within your control, and you should be working hard at that. But sometimes things happen. People are people. We have kind of lower LSATs occasionally. You can kind of make up for that, balance it out with a higher LSAT. That's something that's definitely in your power to do after graduation. You can spend the time, even if it takes you an extra year to apply, but you're spending that year really knocking out that LSAT and getting that high score. It's going to get you into the places that you want to be, and it's going to get you scholarship money. So.
Certainly, definitely worth the delay of a year if you could get a higher LSAT, if you could get into a better school, if you could get more scholarship money. Now, speaking of this idea of slowing down to speed up, let's say someone heard us talking earlier about beginning of the cycle, you apply then, you get more scholarship money, you get better odds. Mm-hmm. I could see some folks who watch the replay of this in August who are thinking, I've got to get it all done now and apply at the very beginning of the cycle. And they might feel like they need to rush through their application. Do you ever come across applications that feel a bit rushed, like the personal statement is kind of has some errors perhaps, or is written too quickly? How do you spot that? What are some red flags you see in applications?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. On your personal statement, we specifically don't have a prompt, but other law schools do. So kind of follow the prompt that you get. But we've seen some beautifully crafted personal statements, and the rest of the application looks like it was filled out in a car in 5 minutes. That is a big red flag to me. If your addendums don't match, if you write a grade addendum, an LSAT addendum, your resume, your diversity statement, whatever it is, and the writing doesn't match, I'm going to be wondering why it doesn't match. Consider every part of the application is important. LSAT's important for scholarship money. GPA and LSAT are important indicators for getting in. But 90% of what you're going to do as an attorney is writing and research. And if you're not a strong writer, that's a concern. But if it looks like somebody else maybe wrote it for you, or you spent a lot of time on one thing but didn't care about the other parts, that tells me something about your personality and your character. So that's a big red flag. We do see people, I've had people with really high GPAs and LSATs who threw together an application and thought that they would just get in because of those. And they were denied because it was clear they put no effort into the work that they were submitting. And this is the first time that we're meeting you is on paper. So if I get an indication that you're sort of lazy or that you don't want to do the work, I don't think you're going to do well in a law school program. So you're probably not going to be invited. We do have a rigorous program. Most law schools are very rigorous. So you need to be able to do the work. But yeah, if I'm getting addendums for grades that are saying, oh, I had a terrible professor who didn't like me, and it was everybody else's fault, and my laptop broke down at this day, and if you have a million excuses as to why you did poorly all throughout college, probably not going to bode well for you.
No, definitely not. And again, you want the numbers in the end, right? Like obviously anyone could have a bad semester or even a bad year, but you're looking for that upward trend with the GPA. And if the LSAT's low, retake.
Well, and I also want to know what was going on. So if you do have a bad semester or a bad year, sometimes we get freshmen who, they had fun their first year out of their parents' house and
Sure.
made some iffy choices, but they came back from it. I still want you to write an addendum about that because I want to know what happened. Part of being an attorney is your character and fitness. We want to know, do you take responsibility for what happened? Do you learn from your failures? Are you a hard worker that can come back from things? Do you acknowledge when you've made mistakes? Those things make you a stronger candidate in my eyes. So yeah, as far as the timeline, one of the things students can do pretty much right away is gather their transcripts. It feels good to have that part taken care of, and letting students know that it's not just about maybe if you went to a few different colleges and you did dual credit in high school and you had community college online, we need transcripts for all of that. So sometimes that's a shock to students, and sometimes it's a shock when their undergraduate GPA that they graduated with changes due to the classes that they took in other places. So letting students know, especially early on, if there are any freshmen looking at this or anything like that, know that your dual credit does count from high school. If it counted as college credit, it counts, and we have to have that. And the LSAC will use a formula to determine what your undergraduate GPA is that is used for your application.
I've actually got a question for you regarding the transcripts. I got this from a student the other day and I had no idea what the answer was. So I'm glad that we're having this discussion right now. So this student went to a college and the college has since closed.
Yes.
It's out of business.
Yeah.
What does this student do with regard to their transcript?
Usually transcripts will go to a clearinghouse and you can access those online. So I would say Google where those transcripts went. They will send you to a clearinghouse. Usually you'll have to pay a little fee for getting your transcript sent, but it's definitely doable. If they've gone out of business, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, it's going to be harder to get than something that went out of business 5 to 10 years ago. There's usually a clearinghouse for all of those where there's some sort of a record of it.
Good. So it is still somewhere. And this is also another reason to start the process early to figure these things out, to go down to that warehouse and hunt it down wherever it might be.
Yes. And it's usually a lot simpler than it seems, but a Google search is a great place to start for just about anything.
Sure.
I always tell students, when you are applying to law schools, when you are interviewing for jobs, do a Google search ahead of time, find out a little bit about that program or that position or that company or whatever it is, so you have a little bit of an understanding of what you're getting into. So I always say it's good to ask questions, but make sure you kind of try to do a little bit of research ahead of time.
Yeah, certainly.
Other parts of the application, the letters of recommendation are very important. And I always like to caution people on a couple of things. We accept, ours is exactly 2. It's no more, no less. It's 2 recommendation letters, and they can be academic or professional. Other law schools have different policies, so always check with the schools that you're applying to. But I caution students about if you live next door to a judge and your mother's best friend is a senator, but you have never clerked for or worked for them in any capacity, they are not going to be your strongest recommenders. They're going to tell me how much they love you, that they've known you your whole life, what a great person you are, but they can't tell me if you show up on time, if you work hard, if you stay late, if you help other people, any of that. Academic, it's great to have a professor that maybe you've had more than once, that you have sort of built a relationship with. And somebody who can tell me, did you struggle in the beginning of the class, but you were a rock star towards the end because of all the hard work that you did? Did you go the extra mile on your research? Are you kind with your peers and a good leader in the classroom? These are things that I want to know. What I want your letters of recommendation and your personal statement and all of the information that's in your application to do is I want it to speak for you. I want to know, based on all of that information, are you mature? Are you dedicated? Are you a hard worker? Do you take failure and grow from it? Do you have a service heart like lawyers need? These are all very important things. So. Yeah.
And so you need to have worked under someone for them to be able to speak to all those qualities. If they just know you personally, like I've known Johnny or Jamie since they were a little kid, they're a great kid, I'm sure they'll be a fantastic attorney, but there's no real professional capacity in which they supervise the person. It's not going to be a really strong letter.
A lot of people think that you have to have an attorney or a judge or a senator or something like that recommending you, and that's not true. I did not know any lawyers when I was applying for law school, but I was a teacher, so I used my colleagues to write recommendation letters for me, and a supervisor. It's not the prestige of the person who is writing you a recommendation. It's what they have to say about your character and how they know you. So, I've gotten them from Governor Greg Abbott and Ted Cruz and Wendy Davis and others, and it kind of seemed like they didn't actually know the person. If your recommender is repeating your resume, I'm going to get the impression that they don't really know you. And it's also a wasted opportunity for me to find out something new about you. Same thing with your personal statement. If you are repeating your resume, stop and start over again with something else. Our personal statements don't have a prompt, so you could literally write about anything. Some people choose a hardship that they've overcome. Some choose some great challenge or some great reward, or something fantastic that they've accomplished. I think those are great if you're focused on one thing. If you have several amazing things that you've accomplished and you try to fit them all in, it's going to seem unfocused. So this is your opportunity to tell us something that doesn't go anywhere else in the application. I want to know who you are as a person. So some people like to write about students who are interested in immigration law. I've gotten statements about how their grandparents immigrated, and it's a beautifully written thing about their grandparents and what their grandparents accomplished, but I've learned nothing about that student. So, shy away from things like that. One of my favorites was about building a flight of stairs, which sounds incredibly boring, but it was from a student who worked with his father, who was a carpenter since the time he could swing a hammer. And he wrote the entire thing about building the flight of stairs and how first you have to build a strong foundation because everything goes on top of that. And then with each rise of the steps, first you're going to make some mistakes and you'll have to go back and correct them, but you become more efficient with it. You can put little flourishes in it. You know that you're building a path for others to follow. And at the end, you can look back on everything that you've accomplished, but know that you're not done yet. You have a lot further to go. And he equated all of that to life, and it was beautifully written. And if he can persuade me with a flight of stairs, he can persuade a jury.
No, it's a powerful metaphor, and really gets you to look at things in a new way. That's cool. I love it.
Yeah. So, taking something that maybe you have a passion for, or just something you've been doing your whole life, and kind of deconstruct it and figure out why you've been doing it and what it says about you. Those are great to tell us who you are.
No, it's very creative. I love it. It's much better than, I also see a lot of personal statements that are just laundry listing the resume, and it's boring and you can't go deep on something. But this stair building might have been maybe listed under hobbies on the resume, like construction work or something like that, or woodworking. But this is far better than that.
Right?
Yeah, really going in depth. I had a question for you, actually, going back to the letters of rec for a moment.
Sure.
Occasionally, I'll have folks who they'll say that the recommender told them, draft something up for me and I'll sign it. How would you recommend applicants handle a situation like that?
I would consider whether or not you have a stronger recommender. Somebody who really wants to take the time to help you reach your goals. If you have a mentor, if you have somebody who you've built a relationship with, it doesn't have to be a legal internship or anything like that. Those are great if you have them. But I've had great recommenders from families for whom the candidate was a nanny, and they talked about, for a couple of years. And when you talk about dedication, showing up on time, going the extra mile, taking care of others, that was a great recommendation letter. But it's because they had that personal experience and they really had something to say about the candidate's character. If your recommender can't do that, or if they just want to repeat your resume, check and see if you have somebody else that's good. Not a family member. I cannot stress this enough. Please don't have your family members write recommendation letters for you. If your family owns a law firm and you've, worked in their offices for a while, before you start applying, maybe 6 months ahead of time, see if there's a colleague of your family's firm that would maybe take you in as an intern, because then you can have a recommendation letter from a law office that's not your family's. I tend to find those very impartial.
What about the diversity statement? We haven't discussed that at all yet.
Yes. Diversity statements are fantastic. And a lot of times people think diversity as far as race. But there's also, culture, there's gender, there's age, there's parenthood versus not parenthood, there's military service, non-traditional coming back to school after several years of being out. I've even had one where a student came from a town of 400 people and moved to a town of 400,000, and what that felt like, and, the challenges of integrating into that culture without losing themselves. That was a great diversity statement. What we want to know in this is your opportunity to tell us what you're bringing to our community. Texas Tech School of Law prides itself on having a great community. That's our students actually enjoy being here and being around each other. They're very friendly. So we want to know, are you going to fit into that? And do you bring something with you that's going to be helpful for others, something to teach? So
amazing. Yeah, lots of alternative ways to share something in a diversity statement. And I always tell folks, if you can find something to talk about, do it, because it's another chance to talk to admissions and share another side of yourself.
Anything that you feel would be something you'd want us to know, addendums are a great place to put those. If it didn't fit anywhere else, that's a good place to put it. Sometimes with writing personal statements, with no prompt, that scares a lot of people, because you can literally write about anything, and that's just too open. What I tell people to do, or what helps me, is I will write down all of my ideas on separate sheets of paper. That just kind of the idea up at the top, and then do some bullet pointing, going down, and kind of flesh that out a little bit and see what I have the most to write on and what sounds, the most interesting. But if I have two, maybe one of them could make a good diversity statement and the other a personal statement. So.
Yeah, I love it. If you have 2 or 3 potential topics, work them into different essays in the application. You don't have to scrap the other ones.
Yes. And I always tell people, when you think you're done with your writing, don't give it to your best friend or your parent. You want to give it to somebody who's going to make that paper bleed. You want them to find all the typos, the missing commas, just places where you kind of meander, because concision is very important in the law. So, and again, make sure that all of those match. So if you're writing your addendums, there's character and fitness addendums as well, where you need to disclose any academic or legal issues that you've ever had in the past. Make sure that those are really well written. So I know sometimes character and fitness statements are difficult to share with others, because you don't want to be embarrassed of something that you have to disclose to the law school, but you maybe don't want to disclose to a friend. That I understand. Just do your best with those. But if you're listing out qualities, your resume is a place where you list out your previous work. I want to see your education on there. Leave off things from high school, unless you started moot court or mock trial in high school, or debate or something, and then continued with it in college. There's really no reason to have it on there. It would have been 4 years ago, and it's, a little different from college. So I'm not sure that's a great indicator of, what you're capable of in college level. Just leave off. You can do skills if you want to, or hobbies if you want to, but it kind of looks like you're trying to fill up the page if you're adding things like that. Objectives are not really all that great, because we know that your objective is to get into law school to probably practice law. So that's a space taker on your resume, and it tells me that maybe you were not that active in your community, you were not active in organizations, you don't have leadership experience, because you're filling up your resume with fluff.
What about going beyond one page? I get so many folks, even recent college graduates, and then young professionals who want to go onto 2 pages. They say they just can't fit it all into 1 page.
We don't hate it, but 1 page is good. And I've seen, I had a military applicant who gave me a 5-page one, and that was so excessive. And they had bullet pointed out every single thing that they had ever done for the service. And that was really unnecessary. So, maybe if you go to 2 pages, you really do have to have reasons for doing that. If you have a lot of leadership in college, and you have a lot of community service activities, if you volunteered for Habitat for Humanity once, and you worked in a soup kitchen once, that's probably not something to add to your resume. If you worked over the year and you built 3 homes, or you regularly every Wednesday go and work at a soup kitchen, or, do something like that, that's good on the resume. But those onesie, twosie kind of activities just to say, hey, I did this, not something you want to add.
But just like the personal statement requires making judgment calls, tough choices, cutting things down to the word count or the page count or whatever it may be. And sometimes you're taking off things that are perfectly valid. Even if you did volunteer every week, but you got to fit it to one page, maybe you do have to cut that.
Yeah.
But you can still talk about it in an essay potentially.
Absolutely. That's a great way to do that, is maybe that's your personal statement. Maybe that's what you want to focus on. But yeah, with the resume, concision is very important. Formatting is very important. If it, again, does not look at, if you can't Google a bunch of sample resumes to kind of copy a format, I'm wondering like how well you're going to do again in law. So a lot of it has to do with the effort that you're putting in. Again, it's that quality application. So if you were in pre-law society or Phi Alpha Delta, or, any of these different law-related things, if you were on moot court, mock trial, negotiations, if you did debate, if you did model UN, I want to see those on your resume, because that tells me that you've been active in things that lead to a, law degree, or something that demonstrates that you were interested in law. Yeah.
Exactly. That you're not doing this on a whim, for lack of a better option, that it has been a long-standing interest of yours, because that means that you've probably gotten some more real-world exposure and sense of what the practice of law is actually like, as opposed to, of course, the media portrayals, the movies, the TV shows, and all that.
Well, that's sort of like our biology majors who were going to go pre-med, and they still finished out a biology major, which, by the way, you can do any major you want in college. As long as you're doing writing intensive courses, that's what's going to be important to us. But we have archaeology majors, music majors. I was a psychology major, obviously political science and criminal justice. But find a program that you enjoy, because A, you're going to get better grades if you enjoy the work. And B, if you decide not to go to law school, you have a degree in something you want to do. But we have people who finished out a degree, but their grades were not so great in their major. Or we've had people who switch majors, and so the grades are bad, and then they switch to something more like political science or something that they enjoy, and their grades shoot up. I want to know, in a grade addendum, I want you to tell me what was going on there. Did you choose a major that maybe somebody else kind of pressured you into, like maybe a parent, and then you decided, I really don't want to do this. This is not where my passion lies. In that case, changing majors is a great idea. You took the initiative, you made the right decision, and you're down the right path. Again, it's explaining all those little things. So.
Right. But even some of those majors that don't really fit neatly within the practice of law that you would expect, or typical pre-law majors like biology, to me, that could be a great pre-law major, because it's so unconventional. And then all the intersections with other fields, biology and law, science and law, patent law.
100%. We have engineering majors who are going to be patent attorneys. We have archaeology majors who are working on, their focus is going to be on property rights, international property rights for artifacts that are found. Who owns those? Cool. Where do they belong? Like, that's a brilliant way to use your, degree. We have every type of undergraduate degree we've had, I'm pretty sure. But again, if you're going to do kind of like a music one, a choir one, an art one, make sure you're doing writing intensive courses that you're doing well in. Even if you have to pad like with electives, I want to see those. Believe it or not, we see your transcripts, and I will go through and see the classes that you did well in and what you didn't do well in. And if you're getting C's and D's in English and research, and you're doing really well at math and science, that's great for math and science, not so great for what you're going to be doing in law school, which is a lot of reading and a lot of writing. So. Right.
And to bring it back to the personal statement again, if someone else clearly wrote your personal statement and your English grades were terrible and your digital LSAT writing sample was also terrible, that raises, again, a number of red flags, I would imagine.
100%. Oh, on the writing sample, there are a few people every year who are tempted by the thought that we don't read those. So the writing sample for your LSAT. And so sometimes they'll write a paragraph and then they'll just write something that makes no sense,
Or I know you're not reading this.
Absolutely. And we see that. So don't. What's great about the digital LSAT is now they have spell check. So use it. That's really nice. But, figure out how to do IRAC. You want to do issue spotting. You want to find the rules. You want to apply, and find a conclusion. You want to figure out how to do that ahead of time and do a little bit of practice on it. So we see that you have that skill coming in, because you're going to do that in every class. So.
Of course. All right. Well, we've got a ton of questions here in the chat. Folks, please feel free to submit more questions and we'll do our best to get to them. If you keep it more general in nature and concise, we'll be better able to address it. Back to the letters of rec. What about getting a letter of rec from a fellow student, like the president of an on-campus organization or an extracurricular activity, but they're young and they're also a student? Is that what you're looking for? Or do you want someone in a more supervisory role?
I think going with somebody in a supervisory role is going to be a stronger recommendation letter. We do have them that come from family friends, and sometimes I write, positive LOR, letter of recommendation, but unhelpful. See if there's an advisor that is for that same organization, because usually it's a academic advisor. See if they can write you one. But you want to stay away from family friends. You want to stay away from friends. They're just not your strongest. If they're absolutely all that you have, then that's fine. But you should be cultivating relationships with people that can write you recommendation letters.
Right. And you also want someone who can say, in my X years of supervising students, this is the best one of the best students I've encountered, versus like, I'm a senior in college and I've supervised one or two people in an on-campus group. Not quite the same thing.
When they say, oh, you should have seen what they did when, planning the tailgate. I'm like, well, okay, that's not really what we're looking for. I've also gotten them from academic professors who write something along the lines of, from what I can remember about this student, they did well in the class when they were there, which tells me I don't know the student. They didn't come to class a lot. Those are not helpful. And you're not going to be able to read those letters of recommendation. You usually check off that you won't get a copy of them. So you don't really know what they're writing. I know this usually goes without saying, but when you're choosing your recommender, ask them if they will write you a positive recommendation letter. I've literally read one that said, I don't think this person should go to law school.
Ooh.
I'm like, why did you even agree with them?
Ouch.
Yeah, choose wisely.
What about length of letters of rec? We had another question on that. How long should a letter of recommendation be?
I've had them where they are 2 or 3 paragraphs, and I had one not too long ago that was 3 pages. So I think it just depends. As long as they're not repeating your resume, we don't really put a cap on letters of recommendation for how long your recommender is going to write. The majority of them write a page. Some of them can write almost a novel about students, and that really speaks to how well they got to know them and how amazing they think that student is. So we don't have, on letters of rec, we don't have a page limit. On personal statements, it's 2 pages and up to 2.5, but really 2 pages double spaced. So
sounds reasonable.
Please double space. Please double space and don't use 10-point font.
No cheating on that stuff.
Yeah. If you can't stay within the 2 pages, then you've written too much and you need to find a way to condense it.
Right. We've got one here on the LSAT, balancing LSAT prep while in school at the same time. I've taught a ton of classes on this, so I won't repeat everything I've ever said on this, but short answer is block off time in your schedule, block off time on your calendar, treat it like a 6-credit class. So you're doing X number of hours to study for it, and you're treating it as a priority, not saving it for the last minute, not saving it for the week before, of course. Consistently every week. If you don't have class on Fridays, Friday is a great day to study. I have detailed day-by-day study plans that go into far more depth on exactly what to do every single day over the course of your prep. So definitely check those out.
Find your allies and find somebody that's going to support you and tell you, keep going.
Totally. Study partners are great. Coaches and tutors are also great. Someone who's on letters of rec, someone wants to get a letter of rec from a professor at Texas Tech School of Law. Would that be looked upon favorably? And how would one go about getting that? I'm not sure if they worked for this person, perhaps.
Well, they'd have to reach out to the professor, but we have had them write letters of recommendation. going back to the resume just a little bit, if a student has participated in one of those prep courses for law that some law schools offer in the summer, prior to students applying, some juniors sometimes do these courses. And Wendy Adele Humphrey is the professor that runs the one here. It's our pre-law kind of clinic. And she's written great recommendation letters for students after that course. She's also denied people recommendation letters after that course. So really, it's that building that relationship, showing what you can do. But yes, you can definitely get them from professors at this law school and from the university. I don't know that they're more favorable or less favorable. We try to keep our friendships out of it. Same thing as, if you had a justice or a judge locally that we all know who's writing a recommendation, I'm not going to say that it's going to carry more weight than any other recommender, because we try to be unbiased in those, ways. However, if it is a professor who is known to just, have these excellent students coming out of the program, who are getting these top jobs, if they speak well for you, that's definitely going to be in your favor.
Of course. All right, we've just got time for one or two more, but if we don't get to your question, please, of course, feel free to reach out to us directly and we'll do our best to help you with it. Let's see here. Try and pick some good ones here. So taking classes that you're really interested in that involve writing, but it could harm your GPA. Is it better to avoid taking the class altogether in favor of one that could give you a better GPA?
I hate to go back to the old classic basket weaving, but if you're, taking a lot of basket weaving classes that you're getting A's in and you were getting C's in your writing classes, law school might not be the right fit for you. If you are struggling in your writing classes, that's okay, but also keep taking them and making improvements. I want to know that you are going to be a strong writer. We can teach you how to write for legal writing. Actually, we're number 20 in the country for in the top 20 for legal writing. Our program is, but I can't teach you from the ground up. You need to have some skills coming in. But if that was just specific to writing classes, don't take classes that you like. If I took trigonometry, I would absolutely fail that course. There's no reason that I need to take it. If it's not part of your curriculum and you don't feel like it's going to help you get into law school, but you just want to show I took a really hard course, don't take the ding for that. Just take courses that are going to help you towards your degree that you're getting, and make sure that you're doing well in writing intensive courses. Writing is a very good skill and you're going to need it for the rest of your life as an attorney.
Right. Of course, naturally. All right. Last one here. I get this one a lot also. So LSAT and GPA versus everything else. If someone just isn't able to get that great an LSAT score, how heavily weighted, I know it's about holistic review and all that, how heavily weighted are the other parts of the application, and what could they do other than create the strongest personal statement, resume, et cetera, possible?
Those are the things that you can do, is have a high GPA, show that you're good at the academic work. If you are below, I'd say, if you're hitting our median LSAT is, I think it's a 156 right now. So it's going slightly up each year, which is fantastic for us. If you're hitting at a 152, but you've got a 4.0 GPA, that's probably a good wait list, possibly even a pool. So, that could be good. If you're hitting around a 3 GPA and you're hitting a 150 or below on your LSAT, it's going to be very difficult for you to get into our program. As much as we want you to be here, we also don't want you to get involved in a program that's going to be very expensive and you not be successful. We don't take students, we love a lot of students, but we don't take them if we don't think that they will be successful, because we don't want you incurring that debt and not finishing the program. That's not fair to you. So I think all law schools are very tough on getting in for admissions. We're tough to get into, but once you're here, we absolutely want you to succeed. We don't do that whole turn to your left, turn to your right. Some of you won't be here trying to, get you out of the program. We definitely want you to succeed. So we're tough getting you into the program so that once you're here, you're going to get through.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to end it, Shawn. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us tonight and share all your expertise on admissions. What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you with follow-ups and any questions about Texas Tech?
Yes. So let me give you my email address. If you email me directly, I will get back to you. So it's Shawn.Adams, which is SHAWN.ADAMS @ttu.edu.
Excellent. I've put it in the chat here for everyone.
Perfect.
All right, Shawn, thanks again for joining. And folks can reach me, Steve Schwartz, through the LSAT blog, as well as the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel, podcast, Facebook group, Instagram, all that good stuff. Folks, again, thanks for joining. Thanks for asking such great questions, and please be in touch. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.